What if I told you that you've already passed a test you never knew you were taking? A test so profound that most people live their entire lives without even recognizing it exists. Edgar Cayce, the legendary sleeping prophet who conducted over 14,000 psychic readings, discovered something extraordinary about human consciousness. He found that certain souls undergo what he called a second birth during their lifetime. A transformation so complete, so total, that it reshapes everything about who you are. But here's what makes this different from anything you've heard before: this test leaves no external evidence. No certificate. No applause. No recognition from the outside world. According to Edgar Cayce, the signs of this transformation are written in your energy, in the quality of your presence, in ways that others can sense but never quite name. Stay with me, because by the end of this revelation, you'll discover whether you've already crossed this invisible threshold. And if you recognize even 3 of these 7 signs in yourself, Edgar Cayce said you've undergone one of the most rigorous examinations a human soul can ever face. The first sign will shock you. Sign 1, relationship with solitude. Edgar Cayce discovered that the first unmistakable sign of soul transformation appears in your relationship with being alone. But before I reveal what this looks like, you need to understand what Cayce called the Great Reversal. According to Edgar Cayce's readings, most humans spend their entire existence running from themselves. They fill every moment with noise, with people, with distractions, because deep down they're terrified of what they might discover in the silence. Cayce said this terror comes from what he termed the soul's abandonment wound, a deep psychological fracture that makes us scatter our energy in desperate searches for approval and validation. But something shifts when you pass through the soul's great test. Edgar Cayce said that solitude transforms from punishment into sanctuary. Where once being alone felt like exile, it now feels like coming home. And here's the crucial part that most people miss: this isn't about becoming antisocial or withdrawn. It's about developing what Cayce called creative solitude, the ability to be genuinely alone without that restless, almost frantic urge to fill the space with anything other than yourself. Listen carefully to what happens next, because this is where you'll know if you've crossed the threshold. Your best insights no longer come from conversations with others. They emerge from the depths of your own consciousness when the external world grows quiet. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls, those who have passed the test, develop an inner communion so rich, so profound, that external validation becomes almost irrelevant. You begin noticing something strange about other people. You watch them flee from themselves through constant social engagement, endless entertainment, relationships that serve as distractions rather than true connections. And here's what's remarkable: you feel no judgment about this. Only a quiet recognition of patterns you once followed yourself. According to Edgar Cayce, this creates a paradox that defies conventional logic. The more comfortable you become with your own company, the more magnetic you become to others seeking authentic connection. It's as if your nervous system has been rewired at a fundamental level. Where once the unknown triggered automatic anxiety, you now approach mystery with what Cayce called active imagination. You develop an actual appetite for liminal spaces, those threshold moments where one version of yourself dissolves and another emerges. But here's what you must understand before we move to the second sign: if you're still measuring your worth by how many people want to be around you, if solitude still feels like something to escape rather than embrace, you haven't yet passed this part of the test. The question isn't whether you can tolerate being alone. It's whether you've discovered that your most authentic self only emerges in solitude. The second sign goes even deeper, and it involves something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Sign 2, shadow integration. Now we enter territory that makes most people profoundly uncomfortable. Edgar Cayce said that the second sign of soul transformation reveals itself in your relationship with what he called the shadow self, those parts of your personality you've spent years trying to hide, deny, or destroy. But here's where Cayce's discovery becomes absolutely crucial. According to Edgar Cayce's readings, most people approach their darkness with one of 2 strategies: they either explode it outward in destructive ways, or they bury it so deep that it festers and poisons them from within. Both approaches fail. Both keep you trapped in unconscious patterns that sabotage your growth. Edgar Cayce discovered that souls who pass through the great test undergo what he called shadow integration, a process so transformative that it fundamentally alters your relationship with every dark impulse you possess. You develop a brutal, almost scientific honesty with yourself about your capacity for manipulation. Your hunger for power. Your ability to wound others when you feel threatened. And here's what shocks most people: rather than terrifying you, this self-knowledge becomes a source of tremendous strength. Listen to this carefully, because this is the part that separates those who've passed the test from those still struggling. Edgar Cayce said you begin recognizing these impulses not as character flaws to be eliminated, but as primal energies to be understood and channeled consciously. Your anger transforms from something that either exploded destructively or rotted in repression into what Cayce termed sacred fire. According to Edgar Cayce, this sacred fire burns only what needs to be destroyed in your life. Relationships that no longer serve your evolution. Patterns that keep you small. Agreements you made when you knew less about your own worth. Your anger serves your growth rather than sabotaging it. Something else happens that people can't quite articulate, but they definitely sense. An energetic integrity emanates from you now. Even when you remain silent, others feel your authenticity because you've made peace with your own contradictions. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls no longer try to resolve the paradoxes within themselves. Instead, they learn to hold opposing truths consciously, allowing them to create what Cayce called dynamic tension, the psychological friction essential for transformation. Your emotional processing undergoes a complete metamorphosis. Where once overwhelming feelings could destabilize you for days or weeks, you now have a container strong enough to hold the full spectrum of human experience without being consumed by it. But here's the critical question: can you look at your capacity for cruelty, selfishness, and manipulation without either defending it or drowning in shame? Can you acknowledge these shadow aspects while neither acting them out unconsciously nor repressing them violently? If you can, Edgar Cayce said you've integrated your shadow. If you can't, you're still fighting a war with yourself that you can never win. The third sign reveals itself in how you handle other people's chaos, and this one will fundamentally change how you see every relationship in your life. Sign 3, immunity to projection. Edgar Cayce discovered something profound about human interaction that most psychology wouldn't acknowledge for decades. He called it the great transference, the unconscious process by which people deposit their unprocessed psychological material onto others. According to Edgar Cayce, once you pass through the soul's examination, you develop an almost supernatural ability to observe when someone is making you responsible for emotions, reactions, or insights that belong entirely to them. But here's what makes this third sign so powerful: this recognition comes without anger, without superiority, without the need to correct or educate. It's simply data. Pure information about how the human psyche operates when it lacks self-awareness. Edgar Cayce said that drama which once pulled you in like a gravitational force now feels completely foreign to your system. You watch triangulations, manipulations, and emotional games with the detached interest of a scientist studying natural phenomena. Listen to what happens next, because this is where most people realize they haven't crossed this threshold yet. Your compassion undergoes a fundamental evolution. It transforms from what Cayce called codependent compassion, the kind that sacrifices itself to rescue others, into mature compassion, the kind that offers presence without losing itself in another's suffering. According to Edgar Cayce's readings, this relates to what he termed the transcendent function, a psychological capacity that allows you to position yourself above dualistic conflicts and perceive the larger patterns at work. This function activates within you when others bring you their crisis. You no longer experience that automatic anxiety that once made their emergencies your emergencies. Instead, there's a serene recognition of the limits of your responsibility and the wisdom of allowing others to meet their own challenges. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls naturally step back from situations where their energy is being used to maintain someone else's emotional equilibrium. And here's the crucial distinction: this stepping back isn't cruelty. It's clarity about the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their avoidance of necessary lessons. People may interpret your new boundaries as coldness. Edgar Cayce said this misunderstanding is inevitable. Those still trapped in unconscious patterns can't comprehend that your boundaries aren't about rejecting them. They're about protecting something sacred within yourself. Your relationship with time itself undergoes a fundamental reorientation. You no longer experience time as a scarce resource to be hoarded or an enemy to be defeated, but as a dimension of existence to be inhabited fully. But here's the test: when someone accuses you of being their problem, do you automatically absorb that accusation? Do you find yourself defending against projections, or can you simply observe them passing through without sticking? If you're still getting hooked by other people's unconscious material, you haven't passed this part of the examination. The fourth sign involves a capacity that Edgar Cayce himself embodied, and it's the one that will sound most impossible until you experience it. Sign 4, Intuitive Capacity. Edgar Cayce said that the fourth sign of soul transformation manifests as an explosive awakening of intuitive capacity. But this isn't the vague, gut feeling that most people talk about. This is something far more precise, far more reliable. According to Edgar Cayce's extensive readings, when you pass through the great test, your intuition blossoms into what he called a fully activated function. Where once you relied primarily on logical analysis, you now consult an inner knowing that connects you to information beyond the reach of rational thought. And here's where it gets extraordinary. Edgar Cayce discovered that synchronicities begin flowing through your life with increasing frequency. Events align according to what he termed divine intelligence, a coordination far greater than your conscious planning could ever achieve. Listen carefully, because this is where you'll know if you've truly crossed this threshold. You develop the ability to distinguish between what Cayce called ego urgency and soul guidance. The wounded ego screams its demands. It creates false emergencies. It operates from fear, scarcity, and the desperate need to control outcomes. But according to Edgar Cayce, the soul speaks in whispers. It offers gentle guidance. It knows the perfect timing for everything. Your ability to read the invisible layers of people and situations expands exponentially. You perceive motivations, patterns, and outcomes that remain completely hidden to others. Not through cynicism, but through what Cayce termed refined sensitivity to energetic information. Edgar Cayce said that decision-making undergoes a complete transformation. You no longer need extensive pros and cons lists. Instead, you develop a direct line to what he called the inner counsel, an aspect of consciousness that has access to knowledge accumulated not just through your personal experience, but through what Cayce termed the universal consciousness. Something else emerges that people find difficult to explain. A quality of listening develops within you that goes far beyond hearing words. You attune to the spaces between sentences. The emotions hiding beneath explanations. The soul speaking through the persona. According to Edgar Cayce, this listening isn't analysis. It's reception. Not judgment, but a witnessing of the full spectrum of human complexity. But here's the critical distinction that separates true intuition from wishful thinking. Real intuition, the kind Edgar Cayce embodied and spoke about, comes with a quality of certainty that requires no external validation. It doesn't argue. It doesn't convince. It simply knows. Can you access this knowing? Do synchronicities guide your path? When you make decisions, do you consult something deeper than your thinking mind? If you're still operating primarily from analysis and logic, if synchronicities feel random rather than meaningful, you haven't yet activated this capacity. The fifth sign reveals itself in how you handle life's inevitable cycles of death and rebirth, and this one will completely transform your relationship with uncertainty. Sign 5, Embracing Cycles. Edgar Cayce discovered something that ancient wisdom traditions had known for millennia but modern psychology had forgotten: life moves in cycles, not straight lines. And according to Cayce, the fifth sign that you've passed the soul's examination appears in your relationship with these natural rhythms. But here's what most people never understand until they cross this threshold. Edgar Cayce said that souls who complete the great test integrate what he called the death-rebirth archetype so completely that they no longer fear the periods when their life seems to dissolve. These times of apparent ending become familiar preludes to expansion and renewal. According to Edgar Cayce's readings, your relationship with uncertainty transforms from avoidance into active engagement. Where once you needed guaranteed outcomes, you now recognize that the most meaningful growth occurs in what Cayce termed the space between decision and result. Listen to what happens next, because this shift changes everything about how you move through life. An energetic economy begins operating within you. Edgar Cayce called this soul-level resource management. Your energy is no longer scattered across dozens of draining commitments. Instead, you learn to invest your life force strategically, like a wise gardener who knows that not every seed deserves precious water. According to Edgar Cayce, you develop a profound understanding that growth moves in spirals, revisiting themes at progressively deeper levels. This brings tremendous patience with your own process. You stop expecting linear progress and start recognizing the wisdom in circular patterns. Your creativity undergoes a fundamental shift. Edgar Cayce said that before the transformation, people create to prove their worth, to gain recognition, to fill a void. But after passing through the test, creation becomes something entirely different. You create not for external achievement, but because creation has become a form of communion with what Cayce called the life force moving through you. There's no desperation in your creative expression anymore. No need for it to be received in a particular way. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls develop an unshakable trust in timing. They understand that everything has its season. Forcing growth out of season only weakens what's trying to emerge. But here's the crucial question that reveals whether you've integrated this sign. When everything in your life appears to be falling apart, can you trust that something is actually being rebuilt? When you're in the void between one chapter ending and another beginning, do you panic, or do you recognize this as sacred territory? According to Edgar Cayce, if you're still fighting life's natural cycles, if uncertainty still triggers fear rather than curiosity, if you're trying to force constant progress without honoring rest and integration, you haven't passed this part of the test. The sixth sign involves something that Edgar Cayce said separates the truly individuated soul from everyone else, and it has everything to do with where you locate your sense of worth. Sign 6, Freedom from External Validation. Edgar Cayce said that the sixth sign of soul transformation manifests as complete freedom from external validation. But before you assume you've achieved this, understand what Cayce actually meant, because most people are still trapped in this pattern without realizing it. According to Edgar Cayce's readings, the human ego is designed to constantly compare and prove itself. He called this the inferiority wound, a deep psychological fracture that drives us to measure our worth against external standards. But something radical happens when you pass through the soul's great examination. Edgar Cayce discovered that this wound dissolves so completely that the impulse to measure your worth against others begins to feel foreign, almost absurd. You develop what he termed inner authority, a psychological structure that validates your experiences independently of social consensus. Listen carefully, because this is where most people realize they're still seeking approval in subtle, disguised ways. Your self-worth no longer fluctuates with the changing tides of opinion. Criticism and praise register with similar neutrality. According to Edgar Cayce, they're processed as information, not verdicts on your fundamental value. This shift liberates enormous energy that was previously consumed in managing your image, controlling how others perceive you, adjusting your behavior to maintain approval. Edgar Cayce said that your authenticity becomes non-negotiable. You naturally choose rejection for who you truly are over acceptance for a performance. And here's what's remarkable, this choice comes without drama, without the need to announce it. Something happens in your physical presence that others immediately sense. Edgar Cayce called it grounded self-possession. You move through space as someone who belongs to themselves first. There's a settledness in your body that comes from genuine inner authority rather than the performance of confidence. According to Edgar Cayce, people may try to manipulate you back into seeking their approval. They may withdraw affection, threaten abandonment, or weaponize disappointment. But these tactics no longer work because the hook they're trying to catch simply isn't there anymore. Your career choices, relationship decisions, and life direction stop being influenced by what will impress others or gain their validation. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls make choices based on soul alignment rather than social approval. But here's the penetrating question that reveals whether you've truly passed this threshold. Do you still check how many likes your posts receive? Do you still replay conversations, wondering if you made the right impression? Do you still adjust your opinions based on who's in the room? According to Edgar Cayce, if you're still performing for an invisible audience, if criticism still wounds you and praise still inflates you, if you're still trying to prove something to someone, you haven't achieved this freedom. The seventh and final sign is what Edgar Cayce called the culmination of the entire transformation, and it involves something most people never develop. Sign number 7, energetic sovereignty. Edgar Cayce said that the seventh and final sign of soul transformation manifests as what he termed energetic sovereignty, the ability to protect your essence without aggression, simply through conscious choice. According to Edgar Cayce's most profound readings, this is the culmination of everything we've discussed. This is where all the previous signs converge into a way of being that radiates unmistakable authority. But here's what makes this different from anything else. Your presence becomes more selective, more precious. Edgar Cayce discovered that individuated souls no longer distribute themselves indiscriminately. They understand that their life force is sacred, and they protect it accordingly. Listen to what this looks like in practice, because this is the most tangible sign that you've completed the transformation. You develop an almost instinctive ability to recognize which individuals, projects, and relationships drain your vitality without offering anything of value in return. And here's the crucial part: you withdraw your energy from these situations without guilt, without explanation, without the need to justify your boundaries. According to Edgar Cayce, this isn't elitism. It's wisdom about the sacred nature of your own life force. He said that before the transformation, people give themselves away compulsively, unable to say no, unable to protect their energy because they fear being seen as selfish or cold. But Edgar Cayce discovered that after passing through the soul's examination, something fundamental shifts. The guilt that once accompanied setting limits dissolves completely. You protect your energy with the naturalness of protecting any precious resource. A natural authority emanates from you now. Not power over others, but power over yourself, which Cayce said is the hallmark of psychological maturity. Your relationship with suffering itself undergoes a final transformation. Edgar Cayce said that before the test, pain is something to be avoided at all costs. But after passing through, it becomes a teacher whose lessons you receive with gratitude. According to Edgar Cayce, this doesn't mean you seek suffering. It means you extract wisdom from unavoidable challenges. You metabolize difficulty in ways that transform poison into medicine. A stillness follows you now. Not an absence of movement, but what Cayce called deep-centeredness. This stillness attracts those who are searching for something they cannot name. You become a living example of what Edgar Cayce termed the individuated soul. But here's the final question that reveals whether you've achieved this seventh sign: can you walk away from what no longer serves you without anger, without the need to burn bridges or prove your point? Can you protect your energy while maintaining compassion? If you're still giving yourself away compulsively, if you still feel guilty for having boundaries, if you still allow energy vampires to drain you because you fear confrontation, you haven't yet achieved energetic sovereignty. Edgar Cayce spent his entire life exploring human consciousness through thousands of readings. He discovered that certain souls undergo what he called a second psychological birth, a transformation so complete that it reorganizes consciousness itself. If you recognize yourself in these 7 signs, Edgar Cayce would say you've passed through an initiation that most people never understand. Your transformation serves not only your evolution but creates a template of possibility for others. The question isn't whether you're worthy of this transformation. According to Edgar Cayce, the question is whether you can recognize that it has already begun. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this work, you can now leave a super thanks below. it's a small way to say thank you, and it truly helps keep this channel going.